once the heat gets turned on and our emotions start flaring up a bit, asking questions is not something we want to do. Telling people what's right and what's going to happen is what we want to do, or what they've done.
Well, welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, I'm talking with Kyle Hargrove. He's our licensed professional counselor that we just love to interact with. He is a genius when it comes to dealing with people, especially couples that are having some challenges. One of the neat things I like about talking with Kyle is he's a dude. Because communication is a little bit different with men. And so I think that's an interesting thing to bring to the table, a greater impact. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between disagreeing and arguing, because there is a difference. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this topic today?
You always ask me that question.
And you always say, I always ask you that question.
Always true.
That's true.
Well, we may disagree that you always do ask me that question or not. But there's no reason, because we disagree on it, that we have to argue about it.
Oh, nice.
There are so many of us who presume that disagreement, or not being on the same page, or not seeing eye to eye, or however you want to put it, instantly means a major conflict. Instantly means we don't like each other anymore. Instantly means we're not on the same team. For as many ways as there are to describe it, there are that many ways to look at it.
Mm-hmm. So I want to dig into that for a second, because you and I both work with a lot of people that have that attitude. If you disagree with me, then the world is ending. You know, and some of the men that are spouses, the wives that I work with, they feel disrespected when their wife has a difference of opinion, even if it's communicated respectfully. They feel disrespected. So where is that coming from?
I think the primary place that it comes from is from living in environments, both as adults and when we were children, where conflict and disagreement was not handled well. And yeah, it might be their experience that it leads to disrespect. It leads to speaking to one another in a way that is not in any way, shape, or form respectful. And if we're going to be able to get past this idea that if you disagree with me, you are my enemy, then we've got to learn to communicate better and more respectfully, especially when we are not in agreement on something.
That's a good point. That whole modeling thing, like a lot of times kids aren't even paying attention when it is just a simple difference of opinion. Yeah. And it levels up to something a little bit hotter. And then they see the conflict, and because it's emotional and, whatever, that's what gets registered. And so it would make sense that anytime there's any kind of pushback or whatever that isn't fully in alignment with their way of thinking, that would result in, bam, let me hit you in the face verbally. That's what I saw modeled for me, or so I think.
Yeah. But look at kids on the playground. Look at the 4 and 5-year-olds on the playground playing in the sandbox or on the monkey bars, and they're inventing games and they just make it up as they go along. And so one of them will make up a rule and the other one will not like that rule. No, I don't like that rule. No, we have to have this rule because da, 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 da. Oh, okay. And they just move right along. Mm-hmm. Now, a couple of years later, they're punching each other in the nose, but we're just going to take them to the age of 4 and 5. Yeah. Okay. When, how many people do you know, seriously, in our adult lives, who, when we disagree with them or they disagree with us, it's okay. Why can't we be more like have the innocence and the goodwill, if you will, Goodwill, if you will. That's a new one. But
Yeah.
why can't we have the goodwill that 4 and 5-year-olds have? Because, they haven't been tarnished yet.
Yeah.
They disagree, but then they just move past it. They forget about it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
When we have disagreements, we're torn up for weeks. And I believe the reason that we are is because we get too thinky.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get too thinky, we awfulize. Now, I know those are two very specifically clinical terms.
Yeah, super technical there.
Yeah, being thinky and awfulize. But instead of discussing and confronting and resolving, we go back and we stew. Mm-hmm. When we stew, we think. And when we think of the worst possible scenarios. Why did they disagree with me? Well, they disagreed with me because of something that I said 3 weeks ago, that if they had been upset about that, then they should have said something, and and we just adding to it and adding to it.
And even worse, we're adding to their motives. Well, they just want this terrible thing for me, or, they want to control me, or they hate my da-da-da. It's just all this false, like make-believe, not real fantasy world that we make up in our heads sometimes.
Yeah. Did you know that on the World Wide Web, there are occasionally positive and beneficial things?
Not really.
Hey, and it said, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Mm. And I thought, that's brilliant. Mm-hmm. Because many of us think that we do. Mm-hmm. We think, well, I'm committed. All right. I have a relationship with the person. I work with them, or they're my wife or husband or child or neighbor or whatever it might be. And so if there's a disagreement and an argument going on, we feel like we've got to put in our 2 cents worth, whether it was about us or not. And some people will be in an argument and they'll be stuck and they'll know what to do. They're saying, come on, get over here and get on my side. Come help me. Mm-hmm. You don't have to take part.
Right.
Arguments are so divisive and destructive because they involve so much emotion. Mm. And when things get emotional, communication usually breaks down.
Yeah, no,
we
absolutely.
Communicate, okay, but what we communicate is in insults and name calling and threats and all things bad.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and we, the relationship we have with ourselves often gets in the way or makes everything worse. In a lot of those situations. I know when I was growing up and grew up in Montana, we did not have cable. Like, that was a thing that did not exist in the middle of the state, 40 miles from Canada. Nothing like PBS, man. I mean, some British station, in Canada, I don't even know. But when I got TV in college, the shows that we would watch would be a lot of Law and Order, legal, Ally McBeal, and, I watched way too much television. I watched when I was in college, like we would all go downstairs and watch General Hospital, which was just toxic, and this one argument would take like 2 weeks, every day, an hour for 2 weeks of it, just the ongoing thing. And then on top of that, you throw in the legal lawyer thing. And so, as a mindset, I kind of got a little bit of influence there, which sounds terrible, but it's true. And I had this perception that if somebody disagreed with me, that was a problem. I didn't have, I could be around my dad and his business and stuff. And, I worked for him for years, and he always seemed to know the right answer. Like, there was an answer and he knew it. And a lot of that's because he was the boss and he had the business acumen to make things go and have it work well. But you get in situations interpersonally and we get defensive when somebody has a difference of opinion. And I think for me personally, the media has influenced that. But I don't know many people that aren't like that, where there isn't some, and when you talk about, well, what do you say? What do you say and how do you say it so that you can present an opinion that's different than somebody? And what I hear you saying is, well, should you even do that in the first place? That's a good check. Because a lot of times we don't need to say anything. I mean, the Bible tells us have no part in foolish arguments. But when you look at, well, how do I enter into that conversation? The only way I know how to do it, because I got good at offending people by arguing with them. And I realized that's a dumb strategy. Is to ask a question. Like, are you open to a different perspective? Mm-hmm. And then giving it. And then at the end of it, how does that fit with what you were just saying? I'm not trying to fight with you. So you have that respect in there, but you got to tell people that, I think, because we're all so ready to punch somebody verbally.
I think it fits perfectly. I think question asking and people who get good at it are able to navigate difficult and emotional situations a whole lot better than people who can't or don't. And when I say people who can't or don't, and reminding them of what they've done again, and then telling, it's like a journalistic theory that says, tell them what you told them, tell them again. That's what a journalistic story is. You've heard that.
Yeah.
So arguments are very similar, because we just beat it to death.
In conclusion, do you see now why you are so very wrong? Yeah.
If you do not, I can remind you.
Yeah. Well, and somewhere along the line, we've lost our curiosity about things. I think the internet has made all of that worse, because I can look something up while I'm talking to somebody if I'm on the phone. I can find 28 people that say they're wrong, right? Or that say they're right, depending on what I type into that search bar, or based on who Google thinks I am, because that algorithm thing, they're going to feed me more of who they think I am, which just makes me more and more closed-minded. So if you don't know that, and you're not typing controversy after everything you search, so you get actual other perspectives, not useful.
Well, when we see so much, and we try to tell children and teach them that they're unique and they're different and there's nobody else like you. And that's true. But then we forget, okay, if there's nobody else like me, if there's no one else exactly like me, especially that I've just bumped into on the street, or somebody that I work with and I didn't get a choice in choosing them, or whatever the case might be, if there's nobody else just like me, then I'm not always going to agree with everybody that I'm around. And they're not always going to agree with me. We're going to see things from different perspectives. And again, parents who teach their kids, everything about you is perfect, everything about you is good, everything. Well, it's good. It's good for them to have a positive self-image and a positive self-esteem. But when we get people that are growing into adulthood thinking that everybody needs to just take stock in what they say and do and believe that that's the right way, and that you can't disagree with that, because if you do, well, you're disagreeing with my parents because they told me how good I was. There are lots of reasons that people always think they're right. But if you get down to what goes on in our head, of course we always think we're right. It's our thoughts. It's the conclusions that we come to based on what's going on in here. But if we're not open to being shown that sometimes we're not right, that's a different story. And that's when so much conflict becomes so angry and hateful and destructive.
Yeah.
Words do matter. And when we refuse to disagree without having a battle royale, those are when the words come out that slice and dice and tear relationships up.
Well, they create reality, because then that's what everybody's operating in, is this is what's been said. This is the reality that exists. And it's like, I stole this from somebody. It's not an original thought, but it's like taking a tube of toothpaste and squeezing it out. You cannot put that stuff back in.
Nope.
It doesn't go back in. The thing that's coming to mind as you're talking about this is, that openness concept. There's a Big 5 personality test. I've talked about this before, and I love it because it measures openness, and you can certainly be too open. Like, you can be just told who you are and what to think by everybody around you. That's a thing. But if you're not somewhat open, then you're not going to have any natural curiosity, which is going to help you be successful in your relationships. And I think, I don't know if there's a correlation for this with humble behavior, but I'm wondering about that now. is there a correlation between the more humble you are, the more open that you are? It would seem that might be a thing. I don't know
see how they could be, how one could be without the other. I think that's a really good correlation.
You sure you're not just agreeing with me? Because,
I don't want to fight with you.
Okay. That's funny.
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
When I was in my graduate program, working on my license to counsel professionally, I was in a practicum setting where I got beat up one night pretty badly by my group. And the session just didn't go well. It was a group counseling, and the co-facilitator just sat there and let me take it. Didn't jump in, didn't try to help, anything like that. So I was feeling kind of sorry for myself, and actually I was pretty angry. I was pretty upset about it. So we're charting at the end of the evening, and my supervising professor calls me into his office. And so he says, "I hear it went kind of rough in there tonight." And I said, "Yes, sir, it did." And he said, "Yeah, I saw it on video." He said, "That was brutal." And I said, "Thank you for saying so." He said, "But I want you to take something into consideration." He says, "You were accused of a few things in there, weren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I was." He says, "And you defended yourself pretty vehemently." And I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And I'm thinking, this is going well. And he says, "Well," he says, I don't even remember what it was, the accusation that was thrown toward me by group members. Mm-hmm. And he says, "I don't want you to answer this question right now. I want you to go home and think about it tonight." He says, "But the accusation that they made to you, is it true?" And of course, I immediately just kind of went, this is not going so well. And he says, sometimes people say things about us, and our first instinct is to defend ourselves, even when what they said about us is true. Mm-hmm. And so I went home that night, kind of confused by what had gone on and confused by the whole situation. And I got home and I sat down and I changed clothes and got ready for bed. And I laid down and I was thinking about it in bed, and I never slept. I never slept. And truthfully, that situation, what they said about me wasn't true, but just the concept and the process of thinking that way. Mm-hmm. Thinking, what if what they're saying is true? What if what we're arguing about, what if I am wrong? Mm-hmm. What if in a conflict that doesn't have to be a fight, it's just a disagreement, maybe I'm making it into a fight because I can't stop and be open and humble enough to say my way might not be the best way.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking might not be closest to the truth, or whatever, it might not be about truth. It might be about how to saw a log in half. I mean, it could be a million different things. But I really like what you said, and that you brought up, that concept of humility and going along with openness, because I think for us to stop and ask ourselves, could I be wrong? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we are. It's a big secret.
No, that's legit. That is absolutely.
To consciously stop yourself and ask that question takes a lot of practice. And that was years ago, maybe even decades ago. And I have practiced it many times in the in-between, and it still doesn't come naturally for me.
Right. Well, and I can relate to that, not because I've been in your shoes, but exactly. But that feeling of, oh my word, could I be wrong? I don't like it. I don't want to be wrong.
I was like
there's security, there's confidence in knowing a thing, right?
And power and pride.
Yeah. And so I've thought about, well, what does that mean? And how could you actually be good at something and not be prideful, not be powerful in that, not be, wrong or right, but just be and be useful to God in that, right? And so much of it is just, I think so much of it is being in the moment and knowing who you are. And if I know who I am, and I don't always know who I am, I know that sounds, I don't have Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. I'm not saying I'm crazy, although there's probably some people in my life that might argue that.
Argue that.
Yeah,
yes.
they'd argue it. Yeah. Nobody disagree, but yeah. Anyway, joke's over. All right, I'll move on. But the point is that when I know who I am, I don't even think about myself. I'm just there to help people do their thing, whether I'm coaching or whether I'm working with a group of people, teaching speakers how to speak, coaching a speaker. I'm not teaching a class. I have no self-awareness in the negative sense of, oh, how am I doing? And, oh, that was really great. And, you're so awesome. I mean, none of that's happening. It's just really focused on the people that are there and all of that. And I have people all the time push back because they say things they've never heard before. And my go-to with that is, tell me more about that, because I really want to understand where they're coming from. And I will tell you that most of the time I think they're wrong with their perspective that's arguing what I'm trying to teach them in those spaces where I have expertise. But it doesn't threaten me to hear what they are hearing and why. And there's the neat thing about that is I can go, you know what, you're not wrong. That is absolutely true in that space. And I can totally see how you would apply that here and how that would fit. Are you open to a different way of looking at that? And so, navigating through that respectfully with, permission and discovering things, because what's really true is I don't know everything. And the older I get, the more I realize I literally probably know nothing. I've just been able to get through some situations.
Make it till you make it.
Yeah. Or, just the Lord just, slapped the Holy Spirit across my mouth, in the right moments, just like,
time or two. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. But I think in those places where I don't know who I am, where I feel the most need to be right because I need something from somebody, like their approval. I had a pastor's wife I worked with for a while. She scared me half to death. She did. I was terrified of this woman. And that's saying a lot about me. This is a long time ago. But in all those moments, I was worried about what she was going to say or think or do. And she disagreed with me a lot. But the way I interacted with her was more and more and more and more insecure, which then made me want to be right more and more and more, it was a great experience because I had to wrestle through a lot of that stuff because that was messed up, man. I never ran into anything like that in the professional world. And so I think I grew a lot from that. I won't say it was fun.
Yeah. You know what? My pastor's wife scared me to death too, and often disagreed with me. Her name was Mom. My mother was a pastor's wife. My father.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I'm like, what?
She scared me very frequently.
Okay.
I held her in very high regard with lots of respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, a few minutes ago, I said something about words matter. And I think you can take apart some examples about how to use and how to put certain words in your vocabulary and your vernacular, especially when you are in a disagreement or a conflict. And you said something about asking questions, and one of the most disarming questions I know of as a therapist, as a spouse, a parent, a person is, can you tell me more about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or how about this? Can you explain more about this part of that to me? Mm-hmm. Compared to, you want to explain yourself? You're right. Using some of the same words, but if you just change a couple of them and the way that they're used, it can completely change the trajectory of a discussion that is not going well.
Yeah, that is so very true. One of the things I've discovered too is that the more I talk to people and I think we're in disagreement, a lot of times we're not. And so when I say something like, well, what does that mean? They'll say, well, that's, I can't do that because it would be humiliating. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Tell me more about humiliating. Tell me more about, like your question about, can you tell me more about that? People define words differently than we do sometimes.
And that's why I go to those simpler words like being thinky and awfulizing and things like that, because they're easier for me to understand. But yeah, a person's definition of a word, their understanding, I'm not going to say definition, I'm going to take that back. Their understanding of a word compared to your understanding of the same word can be off. Mm-hmm. The inflection of your voice, using the same exact word with the same number of letters and pronounced the same way. There are so many different dynamics that can change the meaning of a word mm-hmm. in someone's mind. And if we can't have the humility to say, I need to slow down, I need to exercise some humility, I need to consider the possibility that I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. And I need to better understand what it is the person I'm disagreeing with feels or thinks, because there may be some magic in there. There may be some knowledge in there. There may be some truth in there that I do need to hear, even if the scenario and the environment and the dynamics of what's going on, I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. There's still, being heard is so validating. And if you can convince somebody that you're disagreeing with, that you want to hear what they have to say, that you genuinely want to, mm-hmm. then feeling validated reduces the level of tension in an argument or in a disagreement.
Yeah, that's spot on. I got 3 20-somethings, and they vote. So you have the image in your head of shooting arrows into the future. It's like, yeah, maybe that's not a good thing in some ways, right? Because colleges and things. And so there's places where we've had some differences of opinion. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, the places where I've asked questions and tried to really understand where they're coming from has, not that my goal has been to influence their thinking, but to have them question their own thinking in some places, because right, wrong. Well, no, it's wrong. I'm just going to say it's wrong. It's wrong for universities to have an agenda with our youth.
Absolutely.
That's my personal opinion. I don't like it. And some of the rhetoric that comes through is very agenda driven. And so when some of that gets brought into discussions, I want to have them think about that. So I want to ask questions about how things fit, and what does that mean, and how does that impact that, and versus, I could probably go get all the facts that would explain to you why you're wrong and how that's a bad position to have, but nobody's going to believe anything different than what they do. Matter of fact, they're going to think, oh, that's mom, she's closed-minded, she doesn't know anything, and so we do a disservice to ourselves. We're disrespectful to ourselves when we argue with people to prove them wrong. When we ask questions, then we discover, oh, maybe I don't know something about this. Maybe I can learn something here, even though half the time we probably think we don't, because we're not that humble, right? Just speaking from my own honest experience sometimes, right? But even in that, if we at least take a step that direction, it does build the relationship, and it takes any kind of energy that's negative, feeling threatened around, okay, I know my parents don't agree, or my, coworkers, or whatever it is, the energy that's there ready to, defend the position, that just dissipates when people ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are scary sometimes. You can disarm the scariest person if you learn what types of communication will disarm them. Mm-hmm. and you learn something about that person, not just how they react or respond to certain things that you say, but just a way to meet them in the middle, a way to know them better, to know them at a deeper level than just the issue that we're disagreeing about.
Right. Most of the time, that's just context for something bigger.
But again, we're talking about communication. And we're talking about caring enough about it to do it well. But that simple concept, conceptually, communication is as simple as anything we know. Okay? Executing it, on the other hand, is as complicated and hard, because we take a simple concept and we sprinkle emotion into it. Once we sprinkle emotion to it, it becomes one of the most convoluted, difficult things to do. And good communicators, even in their personal lives, not just communicating with groups of people or speaking or writing, good communicators in personal lives, in business, and whatever it may be, are people who will take who have the self-discipline and will utilize it enough to stop, to breathe, to slow down, and to think. And when you will teach yourself to walk through those steps, when you're feeling the emotion rising, or you feel it walking the door with someone else, you've got to take your time.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, we feel like we've got to be immediate. And when you do that, you lose the ability to respond effectively, respectively, professionally, and you become the reactor again. Somebody's just firing one off just because they did.
Yeah, and that's never good.
And we're taught so much, and there's so much teaching in the scripture that talks about what we do in humility, what we do with kindness in mind, what we do while we're loving our neighbor like we love ourselves. I don't know about you, but some of the worst arguments and fights I've ever been in, I didn't look like I loved the person I was arguing with. Not at all. Yeah. Nor did I act like it. And I have to own that. And I have to learn from it. And if we can't learn from our mistakes, we're going to be limited in our learning.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And we make mistakes like all the time. And there's still in Christendom so many people, they're like, well, I have Jesus, therefore I don't make mistakes and I have to look like I have it all together. And it's not about that. It's about journeying with him, because life is hard and he's with us in it. Makes a huge difference. I had somebody come up to me at church one time and say something, and it wasn't this, but it was something like this: speaking the truth in love. I just your face. Oh. Yeah. Anytime it starts with that, right? Yeah. It was something about one of my kids and what they were wearing. And I knew it didn't match. And, I asked him at home, are you sure you want to wear that? Oh yeah, this is great. No, we didn't know he was colorblind at the time, but speaking the truth in love, I got a bunch of that kind of stuff. But the thing that made me think of is, we have to pick our battles, because there's a ton of people, I'm sure, that would be offended that somebody said something to them about that. And no, she didn't have any place in saying, criticizing, whatever. It's just an outfit at church, whatever. And it wasn't even inappropriate or whatever. It just didn't match. Okay. I mean, settle yourself down there, sis. But I got the whole spiel about how it was misrepresenting our ministry and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we are not that important. I'm so sorry. Jeez, don't know what this is about for you, but anyway, lots there. And, I just kind of listened and thanked her, and then did absolutely nothing with it. And shortly after that, he went for a driver's test, and we learned that he was colorblind. I was like, okay, so let's talk about clothing.
We're going to kill two birds with one stone here.
Yeah. But, part of this process of difference of opinion thing is you got to be able to pick your battles. Like, some of this stuff just doesn't matter. Who cares if somebody thinks this doesn't match. He thought it did. He didn't care. And maybe that was okay, right? I didn't care. I didn't feel like he was misrepresenting anything in the universe. Wasn't, there's a lot of things like that don't matter. And yet at the same time, there are things that we're betraying ourselves and not honoring God by not saying something. A lot of the time it doesn't matter if we have a difference of opinion, but sometimes it really does.
It really does a lot. And one of the things I wanted to just make sure that we got in before we finish is that when you're gripey and argue-ish with people on the regular, mm-hmm. you actually create an air of dishonesty around you.
Ooh, speak more about that.
Okay. You create the dishonesty coming from the people that you're gripey and argue-ish toward. Who wants to get in the argument with the argumentative person? Mm. Technology. Who wants to continually battle with that person who is always battling with people? Nobody does. So in order to avoid those battles, they will tell you what they think you want to hear.
Oh, lies.
Instead of the truth.
Yep.
And you create levels of dishonesty around you, and you wonder why why doesn't anyone ever tell me the truth? Mm-hmm. What? I created that environment? I created that scenario? Yeah, you actually did.
Ouch.
You did it by every time there's a disagreement, you participate. Mm-hmm. Every time there's an argument, you jump in. Every time there's an opinion to be had, you've got to have one, and you've got to convince everybody that yours is right and theirs is wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's a thing. And then it destroys trust.
Yes.
In all of those relationships. Because it's better to know somebody doesn't like you, and that's what's true, than to have this false thing. Because people know. You live with people, they know.
Yeah. And if you wonder in your environment why you can't trust the people around you, or why they never tell you the truth, it's time to kind of start looking inward, because when there's when the body of work shows the same problem and pointing the same direction, most, if not all of the time, that's a hard pill to swallow when that is you. Mm-hmm. When someone told me once, the whole world can't be out of step, that's something I had to think through. And when I thought through it, I thought, yeah, that's true. And wait a minute, you're talking about me. Mm. You're talking about the whole world, always disagreeing with me about the same thing. And that means, could it be that I'm the one that's wrong?
Ouch. Yeah. That's a powerful thing. Oh, this has been a great discussion, Kyle. I really appreciate it. Gosh. So yeah, y'all, if you want to get some more information about some of your challenging relationships, pop by our website at greaterimpact.org. And you can grab our little booklet. It's an ebook called Stop Walking on Eggshells, because, that's not useful to your relationships. And we'll see you next week.